Record. All right, so it's recording.
Okay. So what are we talking about tonight?
Case controllers.
Yep. Specifically
XRs,
at a certain
place that
chain.
can't be mentioned. Yes, XR75 CX.
So this, guys, is an XR75 CX case controller. CX being that's a specific XR75 for a
To run on
customer that we
Emerson.
do.
Yep.
So this XR75, as you can see, got roasted recently. That's what this black spot is right here at a store. And the reasoning for this is at this specific chain, half of their stores are 208 volt control loops and half of them are 120. So do you want to explain what the difference is?
Yeah, this store has 120 volts powering all the case controllers. All right. But they still run that one. So they're powering that off the fan circuit. Okay. So they still have 208 volt panel upstairs. So they got 208 volts coming down, sharing one neutral. Okay. So if you have any problems and anything crosses, it sends 208.
Yep.
So in this instance, there's a few things that happened at the store. One thing was we had a heater burn up. The heater burned up, fell down, sent 208 through the defrost sensor, and the rest is history. And me and Justin actually ended up there that night, finding we counted 60 bad case controllers, and Justin went out there with the guys and ended up with 48 case controllers. It literally ran 208 volts and fried every single communication loop and everything.
So a thing is with these controllers, guys, is you'll get a burn mark right here, right about here on every controller. And the reasoning for that is you have 120 volts to power this case controller, right? And then you also have on your lead case, you have your solenoid wire hooked up. And then you also have your case temp sensors. So a lot of the time at this specific store, you're going to have a discharge air temperature sensor here, and then you're going to have a defrost termination sensor as well. So let's say one of these sensors is wired into this controller. What's going to happen is if you send actual voltage on the sensor wire, it's going to get to the controller itself. And it doesn't stop there because on all these stores that we do, we actually have Emerson E2 controllers. So you have a communication loop that goes. So
daisy
it's supposed
chains
to be
between
split.
each one. Yes, it's supposed to be split into two comm loops. But at this particular store, back in 2019, I actually had one go bad, and I told the management company at the time that they needed to get it fixed. Obviously, they refused. They left it on one control loop. So when we had a failure, it went through all the controllers, not just half of them, which is why we ended up here losing 48 case controllers. So
yes. So what happens is if you have, let's just say 60 case controllers in the same daisy chain for the comm loop, if you send voltage to any of the, just one particular case controller, now that voltage is going to get sent down the line all the way through every case controller. So another thing that happened, it wasn't just the defrost. I noticed the shield wire for the comm loop, because you have a positive, a negative, and a shield for your comm loop. And 208 volts was possibly sent there, but we know for sure 120 volts was sent on that shield wire, which ended up frying a lot of these controllers, just like this one. This was actually from the store right here. So one thing you can do, and we were talking about solutions for this in the future. One of the techs for this chain said he actually had a meeting with Emerson about this, and they said a very smart thing to do when it comes to this is leave your shield wires connected to keep the daisy chain running, but
not to each controller.
Connected to the controller. So obviously wire them in, but use a Wago or a wire nut for the shield and just leave it disconnected from the controller. That way, if your shield wire for some reason touches actual power, you're not going to send it down the line and fry all your controllers.
which then goes to the next point of when they replace these controllers. You have to take serious care, right, in hooking these things up, because Justin got to see firsthand with one of the techs that this particular chain had there, wired in a controller and blew it sky high, brand new one. So you have to take your time, wire in everything. You don't rush through this. If you have one tiny little strand, which is what he happened to have, and it touches, then 120 is going to burn it up. Now, he's very lucky.
Yeah, very lucky.
If he's very lucky, it didn't pass it through the whole comm loop and it just burned up that one brand new controller. So you have to be very careful. There's no need to rush any of this. If you ever find yourself out, you're replacing a case controller, here's the thing. If you showed up and the case is down, it's already been down for a few hours. So there's no sense to rush through. Take your time, and even being careful, because the night me and Justin were there checking all this stuff, we had a situation where one ended up shorting out. Now, luckily, all these controllers are already fried, but you just got to take your time, move through slowly. You know, there's no rush.
Another point as well. So at this store, this chain, so a lot of grocery stores, you have 208 volts on pretty much your comm loop. You have it on your controllers. You have it on your everything except basically your fans, right? Because your fans are going to be 120. But your controllers, like at most of our super centers,
and what
others,
he means the power. The comm loop is still the 2.5 DC,
yeah,
but he means the power. Yes,
the main power, your high voltage. So the only thing you're really going to have is your fans, right? Because your defrost heaters are going to be 208, and also your controller power is going to be 208. Now, your comm loop's going to be the same no matter what. If it's an E2, it's going to be universal. But what you want to do is when you change one of these at these stores that it's 120 volts, you have to shut the power down. There's no way getting around it. Because if you don't shut the power off, let's say I have a bad controller, I remove the neutral off the controller, right? Now that has the possibility to send 208 to every single controller on that.
Yes, because
lineup.
it's a shared, at this store, it's a shared neutral between the fans and the lights. You
The
remove
lights.
that neutral, now you're going to bond the pair and you're going to have your 208. So, and this goes back to the no shortcuts ever. You know what I mean? Always take your time, do it correctly. And man, it saves so much extra time just taking your time and doing stuff correctly.
Yeah, and they don't give you a lot of room on the brackets for these. So what you actually do is when you remove the piece of metal, this slides right in and the piece of metal goes right over the top of this. So all you see is actually the display. So when you slide this in, your wires are kind of stuffed right in there. So like Clayton was saying, you need to make sure that you don't want to. A lot of people like to strip a lot of wire
like
off
that far.
They want a lot of the conductor showing. And the thing is, you really don't want that. You want the least amount possible, because all you need is just a little bit to go inside these terminals because they're so small. You don't want any wire showing, because when that wire bends, if that conductor is showing, it can touch terminal to terminal, or it can touch terminal to the actual case. And that is a no-no. And you have to make sure before you turn power on that everything is good. Because like Clayton was saying, we did have a tech that did not confirm that. And we had already replaced about 30 of these controllers. And these are about, what, $500 a piece?
Yep.
They're about $500 each. So it can be a very expensive, mistake to make.
And, there's little hacks each person's going to have. But, one thing we did see on a few of them where they've been replaced in the past, someone went ahead and made some jumper wires off. Then you could just make connections. You can use whatever you want, Wagos or whatever. Wire nuts are okay, man, but the Wago lever connectors work very, very well on comm loops. We have had very good luck with them. You got to be careful on high power, but on comm loops, they work very well.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't use Wagos on 460, but on comm loops, it's not a bad idea. And then take that shield wire off. It's not going to make a difference.
Just make sure all the shields are together, right?
Yeah.
You want all the shields together on the whole loop, but you just don't want them attached to the controller just for safe. Yep.
Just together.
And then once you get them all online, right? Once you get them all back working, 2.5 volts DC is what you're looking for. Now you can be a little bit under, a little bit over, but if you start getting to 1.5 volt 0, or you get to 5 volts DC, don't even bother. You got to move to the next one, which is how me and Justin started. When we started checking this out, we went ahead and we just picked one case, separated it. And of course, after about 35 controllers, we realized what the problem was, that the problem extended way farther out than we thought. So that's the best thing. 2.5 is what you're wanting to look for. And if you ever have on these case codes, you have a comm loss, just go right to the daggone middle and disconnect them and just test it. You got 2.5, or if you got 8 volts one way, you know which way to go. Because at this particular customer, they are labeled, right? And also, this is another thing. It takes 5 seconds to write something down with a Sharpie on there for the next guy. Like all of our guys, we could check the notes. They can call me. We can go through the notes, but that doesn't work for everybody, right? So a lot of times it's good just to write with a Sharpie.
When you walk by one of these controllers at a store, if you see, like, obviously confirm that you have 120 volts to these specific ones, because you have dick cells that are 208, you have dick cells that are 120. In this instance, this is a 120 dick cell. Make sure you have power. If you do, and the display is dead, the controller's done.
Yeah.
Don't spend time trying to finagle with it, and maybe it's okay. If you smell any sort of smoke or burning from them, done. Don't waste your time, because now by leaving that in the loop, if you replace other controllers, you could possibly burn up the brand new ones.
Absolutely. And when he says the burn smell, we don't even have to explain it. You'll know it, because literally he was there and I brought a controller down thinking we could get it running, and literally you could smell it right when he walked in the front door of the store.
Yeah.
So, and the whole thing about this, man, is you always got to be taking the chance to learn and look at all these things and look through all these things, and just take your time. There is no rush. There's never any rush for any of this.
No, definitely. And if you do have, again, at these stores that are 120 volts, anything you're doing, just be very careful with wiring on these circuits, because we actually this store that we're talking about just went under a remodel. And what happened was the remodelers were having power issues with the case, and they decided they were going to run an extension cord from a totally separate circuit. And they ran an extension cord for the lighting power off of a separate circuit, and they ran an extension cord from that to a case controller to power it. So essentially what's going to happen is, if we ever had any problems with the lights, if we ever had the lights go off, which they do at nighttime, now that case controller is going to go into comm loss, because it's not going to get power at night every single night.
And then by the time, and that's never an emergency, by the time you show up there when they open, it's going to be back in communication. And you will literally lose your mind looking around, wondering why is it losing communication. But yeah, and they didn't even try to hide it. It was straight up an extension cord right on top of the case. But also, that's something to be mindful of. You just shut the breaker off and assume. Don't just grab a hold of it. Always check power.
Always check.
Always check.
You never know who was there before you. You don't know who's working there. So if you always just assume that there's power there, you'll probably not hurt yourself as much. Versus you don't want to ever assume.
Yep. Don't ever be in a rush trying to, like I say, it all goes back to taking your time. So, but these are little things, man, that we've learned in the field, and hopefully it can help somebody else, learn these things as they go.
Do we want to talk about that trick that we do with defrost termination sensors, replacing them?
Yes.
What you do?
That'll go in. Now that'll also go into when we talk about Hussmann cases. But at this particular location, Hussmann cases, Hussmann RL 5 and 4 and 3, all those glass doors, they use defrost termination on Emerson, right? Problem is, man, is they run them down the back wall, not in a chase. They're zip tied in 100 places because it worked good at the factory, right? So they run it down and they run it under, right? And then when it goes down and under, they run it right near the stinking defrost heater, and it burns up inevitably. Go ahead.
Mind you guys, what he's talking about is an RL345. That's the amount of doors in the case. So let's say this defrost termination sensor goes bad. Like he's saying, it goes down from the controller into the back wall. Okay. So now if you wanted to actually replace that the way that it is from the factory, you'd have to pull every shelf out. All the product would have to get removed. Pull every shelf out, and you'd have to unscrew that back wall, pull that completely off just to get to the wire to sneak a new one down.
Yes. So, and the thing is, the customer we're talking about, and most customers do not use that defrost termination, because here's the problem, man. It's every time it's real close to the defrost heater, and it'll cause premature defrost failure. So a hack I've found is literally you find, you're on the back of that dick cell, you're going to have, it's going to have certain plugs. It's going to share a common. It's going to have the air temp on one, defrost on the other. So the best thing is I've found is you just tie it in with the air temp and let it eat, and that'll be the same, or they can just, if you're in good with whoever's running the store, they'll just disable it for you, because they cause a lot of false early defrost terminations doing it that way, especially because not just this customer, but a lot of other customers don't like to do more than one defrost a day, which,
That's it. Or in Florida.
Yeah. So, and it is doable, but everything else has to be perfect, which never happens. Right. So
if people haven't been to Florida and you're from Nevada or parts of the West, the humidity here is one of the highest in the whole country. So when you're running one defrost a day with no dehumidification working, it doesn't normally last very long. Before you ice it.
But with the defrost heaters, that's the thing, man. Usually I just run them and tie them right in with the air temp, and then you can leave it. Or, like I say, you get with whoever's there and they'll disable that, because that will cause a lot of, I know Justin was out on a few at another market, and another same exact design, and literally kept losing defrost. It would terminate instantly. So obviously we did a test. We did a test, put a force, made it read -10, and it didn't terminate,
Because if you guys know, the E2 controller takes an average on that circuit. So if you have 4 cases and you have 4 defrost termination sensors, and you have one that's bad, right, and it's reading high, it's going to take an average and it's going to kick your circuit out quick out of defrost. So like he was saying, when he says tie it in, what you can do is the controller is going to be in the front of the case on top, and then it's going to go into a conduit line, and it's going to go down into the case. You'll notice there's going to be a J box on top of the case. Wires are going to go down in, and if you need to, you can drill a hole right there and just snake your wire down in, and just, like he said, put it right with the discharge air, and it works just fine like that.
And another, while we're on that, if you have a discharge air temp sensor go bad, okay, now listen, you got to be mindful, you got to look, but a lot of times there's this little circle inside the Husman RL cases, all right, where the sensor is tied. So if you look on top of the case and there's nothing, and you don't want to pull everything apart, if you take that off, right, and you take a drill bit, and if you take a drill bit and drill directly up through the case, make sure there's nothing on top, you can feed a brand new sensor wire right there, so you don't have to pull the whole thing apart, put a dab of silicone or even a junction box up there, and you're fine. So much easier. I've done that in a lot of other cases, man. But just think, you don't want to. The store's already not happy about pulling the case, man. If you can do it, that helps out a bunch. So just a little hack there.
It's better to run a whole new sensor, but if you need to,
you can splice it. Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes you can splice it if they leave you enough slack, like he's saying, because that circle is just the sensor.
But a lot of times they don't.
Yeah. It's tight.
So
let's see. What else do you want to talk about on this?
I mean, we covered all that with the CPC controllers and everything, and just going through that. I don't want to jump too much into the Husman thing, because and not just Husman, any glass door case, because we got a whole thing we want to do about glass doors. So I think we covered a good amount on the CPC, the Emerson case controllers, and then also and we'll dive more into the CPC controller, but I think we covered that pretty well, man, with looking at that, unless you want to add anything else in there.
Just always make sure when your store that you're working at, if there's several vendors working at a store and it just went under a remodel, be very mindful if cases are getting set or moved or removed. Be very mindful that the programming is correct on a lot of these cases. We've had a lot of issues where a case was a different circuit entirely. So let's say you had 10 doors in a straight lineup, and then now you have 5 doors in a lineup, and then they capped it off on the end with an end cap. Well, sometimes they won't pull different wire for that circuit. So it was a different circuit now, okay? But now instead of it being different, now they're all on the same circuit.
Oh
So
man, yes.
you have two different defrost lines at this point. You can have, let's say it was A4 and A5. Well, if they didn't program a combiner to combine the defrost for those cases, now we're defrosting at two separate times of the day, and it doesn't work because,
or not at all, because like in this instance Justin's talking about, they had A18 and they had A4. So they took A4 out, added it to A18. The refrigerant lines are all tied in properly, but the defrost, A4's contactor is just up there doing nothing because it ain't even in the program.
not in the program.
And there's multiple ways you could do that, but imagine though, you show up, you have no clue what's going on. You see the remodel guys out there. It doesn't matter who they're from. It is what it is. It happens. But super confusing when you're in there putting A18 and defrost and the case E just ain't making it. So then you're up there, you're checking amps. You're like, this doesn't make sense. And then you come to find out they've done stuff like that. And then going on with that, it depends on whatever client you're working for. It doesn't matter. Being in good contact with whoever's running that helps, and just is what it is. People are human. You're going to come across people who are not connected at all and they'd rather be anywhere else but their job. But, just always be mindful and look around, and a one little trick before we go that I was taught a long time ago. If you really want to know what's going on, you talk to the janitor at the store. They will tell you everything. Serious. I'm serious. You can talk to the manager, I'll be nice, but if you talk to the guy who's the hourly associate, he will tell you just about everything you need to know. So just little hack I always like to use. So
always keep up with everyone while your store is under a remodel.
Yes.
Make sure you stay down.
Yes, that is. Yep.
Your head in trying to figure out what's going on, especially with power.
Yep. And one more thing here. We have some people we do service contracts with, and every time there is even one single case change, the paperwork we have to fill out just for one case change. But there's no secret to know that everything was down to temp before they started and after they left, and it just makes it so much smoother, so. But I appreciate everybody listening, or if anybody even listens, who knows,
We'll see. Maybe people will listen. Maybe not.
But
we'll get our one viewer.
Get one view, yeah. And what we'll do is we'll be back and we'll go through how to set superheats, cases, and all that stuff. And I know there's other podcasts and stuff that do this, but this is mostly for our company that can help the young guys and the new guys.
Everyone knows this is that we do commercial supermarket rack refrigeration. We don't do industrial. We don't do residential. We're strictly just commercial rack refrigeration for supermarkets.
And we do the AC there as well, but 99% is rack refrigeration. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll do HVAC at other customers as well, but we don't do industrial. So don't ask us about screw compressors and ammonia.
Nope, nothing to do with that. No.
So. Most of our stores are 404, 407.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the other ones are 407F.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
507F.
Yep. So, well, we appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You guys have a good day.
All right. Bye.